Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy the story. This was written by a real human. So please leave a like if you enjoy it to help the channel and subscribe for future content. It's free. Links to the story and Patreon will be in the description. Please go and support the author. Any support is always appreciated. If a human narrator would like to narrate my stories, please contact me. I write these in my spare time between work and my children and just don't have the time or quiet space to narrate them myself. I hope you can understand. Thanks for your time, and again I hope you enjoy the story. And for the love of everything YouTube, this is literature, so please leave my channel alone. Let's get into it, folks. Structural stability won't be a problem, ma'am. The engineer pointed at the modified specs. We doubled up on supports here and here on each bay door. He looked back at her. I'd wager it's probably stronger now than before you had us cut out and repurpose the bottom 2 decks with improvised hidden missile tubes and storage for another 2,000 birds. He grinned at her and added, "We have a bet on how much higher the stress test is going to score on her now that she's been through a proper engineering corps refit and repair." "And how long until testing?" Barbara asked. It had been 10 months since she had signed her ship over to the shipyard, and while she had added a few little extra modifications, they were as of right then nearly 2 weeks over schedule. And to be perfectly honest with herself, she wanted to get back to work. "First test starts in 6 hours, ma'am." He shrugged. "Depends on the inspector as to how long the entire set of them can take. I'd say give it a couple days, ma'am." She thanked him and started back to the command bridge and then answered her communicator as it showed CMC Dillon's tag. "Yes. Ma'am, the woman from Naval R&D just showed up at the shipyard. Would you like me to escort her up to your office when she gets to the slip?" he asked. She thought about it and said, "No, I'll go meet her." "Did Private Vuel finish his project on schedule?" "Yes, ma'am. It's in Modified Bay 1, he finished it last night by his report. In fact, he's supposed to be coming on duty any minute." "Do you want me to have him meet you there?" Dillon asked. "Yes, and have him have that presentation ready. I'm willing to give it a try, I like the idea. But it's up to him to sell it to the pencil pushers." She replied. "How many of them did he get finished?" "It says 1 full volley, ma'am." He replied. "That can't be right, he said he only had 3 working yesterday." Excellent, she thought. Next order of business as she started towards the lift. "Oh, he probably did. Contact the shipyard, ask them very nicely to see if they might be willing to trade a roll of nano sheeting for possibly half of what's in F-65, Deck 5 aft." She could hear CMC Dillon trying not to swallow his own tongue. But only for a moment, as he recovered very quickly. "Ma'am, I don't know what you're talking about, ma'am." He started. "I know you helped set that operation up. I signed for the obscene amount of sugar. Don't fuck with me on this, Chief." She cut him off. He was only silent for a moment before replying. "Yes, ma'am. Anything else, ma'am?" "Testing starts in 6 hours. I want the command crew in my office in 5 for an overall readiness briefing." She waited for his, "Yes, ma'am," before disconnecting. A little while later she was riding the lift down to slip R4-2, where the Navy R&D woman was just arriving. She wore the white uniform with blue stripe denoting her job and had the 2 lieutenant stripes of her Navy rank apparent on her shoulder. The woman was talking to the station security stationed right outside the slip, getting her ID card scanned, and then was allowed to pass onto the docking slip. Barbara had just walked up as the woman was inspecting the outside of the ship. After all, the Navy R&D had only received one of the 2 surviving Orion vessels. And Barbara was willing to bet her last credit that nearly a standard galactic year into possessing one, and it was still so wrapped up in red tape nobody from the Navy had actually seen the inside of it. She put on a smile as she held out her hand in greeting. "Hello, Miss Yu." The woman took her hand, barely able to take her eyes off the graceful curves of her Orion hull. "Captain Thornton, I presume?" Barbara nodded. "Would you like to take a closer look?" Barbara asked, knowing what the answer would be. "Of course. It's beautiful," answered Miss Yu. "Good, butter her up for the pitch later," she thought. She glanced at her communicator and gestured towards the refuge. That would give Private Vuel enough time to get on duty and get that presentation ready. They went through several decks, taking a quick look at the engines and Orion battery and the command bridge. That burned about an hour, and as they made their way to Modified Bay 1, Barbara received a message that Private Vuel's presentation was ready, so she started to discuss what she had asked her to come to the ship to take a look at, without really discussing anything in detail. By the time Miss Yu and herself made it to Modified Bay 1, the woman knew she would be looking at a new weapon. It used existing tubes, so no ship modifications were needed, and it was able to be produced quickly and easily with existing parts. The man was waiting in the bay for them, his uniform crisp. His black long slightly curly fur contrasting sharply with his icy blue eyes. He greeted them with a salute which Barbara returned, and without waiting she said, "Well, Private, I got the lady here, now sell it, man." She smiled, seeing his discomfort and nervousness melt away as soon as he started speaking about his passion project since volunteering for her initial crew. He was an Orion weapons officer and a weekend warrior engineer that had witnessed his Navy get their asses whipped. He didn't just want to blow shit up, he wanted to absolutely destroy whoever might try to ever whip the Navy he was part of, and do so as efficiently as possible. And the young man was serious about it. If he didn't get a job offer from the Geek Squad after this, a private company would definitely scoop him up after his Navy term was completed, she was sure of it. He was very intelligent and driven. The V-Whips. A modified ship-to-ship Cerberus missile. That instead of exploding with a conventional warhead, used a condensed sphere of self-replicating nanites pre-programmed to feed on anything that hasn't been tagged as friendly. Once they have been triggered on impacting an enemy hull, the nanites begin replicating exponentially until the pre-programmed time elapses and they became dormant. What was ingenious or insidious if you prefer, was Private Vuel's programming of those nanites. The missile holds a small shield generator designed to match the electronic frequency of the target and in testing could make it through an enemy shield about 97% of the time. Much better than anything the Navy had except the darts and the components for the miniature blink drive, and each one of those was what made them expensive. Using an already mass-produced, cheaply made, efficient missile tube like the Cerberus missiles for the base. And cheap industrial-grade self-replicating nanites programmed with a construction-grade build program. V-Whips can be easily produced, ma'am, said Private Vuel. She was pretty sure someone had already thought of using self-replicating nanites as a weapon before Private Vuel. And she was absolutely sure there were reasons the Navy didn't use them. Having thought long and hard about it, though, she figured they probably hadn't went about it the same way as Private Vuel. "And this is the prototype?" Miss Yu asked, placing her hand on the missile sitting on the stationary rack. "One of them, Miss Yu. It would be hard to get a good baseline of data if we only had one available." Barbara motioned to the mounted tubes within the bay. "We have one full volley." Stovevips. Miss Yu continued to examine the missile and ask Private Vuel questions which he was more than ready to handle. At this point she could have probably excused herself, but she didn't. Instead she found herself bidding Miss Yu a good day as she left the slip. Having secured recompensation for the prototypes, Miss Yu informed her she would be in contact after she got into touch with Bupers and got an official observer assigned for the next mission to see how well the new prototype worked. As she made it to the mess hall, she stopped and grabbed herself a plate and continued on, meandered around her ship, burning time until the readiness briefing. She liked to interact with her crew. Over the last few months they had grown rather fond of seeing her popping in at random. She didn't think she would ever forget Ensign Farlos's reaction when she had turned around to shake the hand of the person that had jumped in behind her to help guide a new shaft in the oxygen pump and get it bolted in, and found Barbara standing there holding a wrench. A job that took nearly an hour and had both women covered in zero-G grease by the end of it. The Orion woman had nearly jumped out of her own skin, apologizing for assuming to order around her claw. Then she had realized she used the wrong term and in a panic froze up. Her face frozen until Barbara had lost it. She had laughed so hard her face had hurt. At first Ensign Farlos hadn't known what to do, which for Barbara had made it worse. But then Barbara had lost her footing and tried to pinwheel and stay on her feet to no avail. Her feet went higher than her head and she hit the bottom of the pumping tank with a spluck. Ensign Farlos lost it herself. And Barbara couldn't stop laughing. It had taken them a good half a standard hour after they managed to extract themselves to stop the laughing and giggling. It had felt like her face had hurt for a week after that. There had been other interactions. Apparently the Orions hardly ever had one-on-ones with their captains. Not that most U.S. Alliance captains went out of their way to get to know everyone. But this was Barbara's first time as captain, and she wanted to get it right. And that meant giving everyone a face to put with the title. She was going to make sure her crew knew who they worked for. And with any luck a reason to try even harder if it was ever needed. "Captain, please report to main medical, please," came the call over the ship's comms. She looked at where she was in relation and hurried to a lift going up 2 decks and across the ship. She arrived to an exhausted-looking Eladrin man. Dr. Sarn had been working on another project. "You look like you've been burning the candle at both ends, Doctor. Have you been resting at all?" She immediately got worried. If Doc went down, all kinds of bad things could happen. He waved his hands dismissively. "I'm fine, no need to worry, Captain. As you know, we have been trying to crack the Foxhole problem for the Orions. Last night right as I was about to sleep I had an epiphany. He took out his hand and held up a small vial of amber-colored liquid. We were looking for the answers into complicated of an answer. This is a synthesized estradiol added to some basic Genesis-produced female growth hormones found in humans. He shrugged his shoulders. It's pretty simple. I was laying in bed listening to the news, almost dozed off when the interview with the first human Orion hybrid parents came on. He tossed her the vial. It just popped in my head and I lost track of time once I started on it. He rubbed his bald green sparkly head with his hand, his soft tinkling voice sounded weary to Barbara. And it'll work for them? Barbara asked, holding it in her palm looking at it. And make more? He nodded. It should. It'll have to be tested first of course, but it already passed the efficacy test in the sims I ran. He reached over and took a data pad off a table with odd medical devices you probably needed a medical degree just to name and flipped a couple times and tapped it. Her communicator pinged, receiving a message. I also sent a copy to San Francisco Medical Research and Development of Vaccines and Treatment Center, and one to Regent Tara's office. This should be easily fixable now that we know what the Foxwell actually does. It's simply turning a switch on in their case. She nodded, making a note to read the results even if she already knew she probably would only understand a quarter of it. Good job, doctor. She handed the vial back with a smile. Now get some rest. He nodded as he took the vial and placed it in a cooling unit and she turned to leave. Oh, Captain, I had another reason to call you. Dr. Ovra Orion has agreed to join us as the ship's resident xenobiologist. I wish to inform you so you could have her quarters prepared. Thanks, Doc, that is good news. Barbara replied. It really was good news. A resident xenobiologist was required for multi-species ships. And of the 24 names she had requested, Dr. Ovra Orion was third on the list as the most qualified xenobiologist looking for employment. She would be an excellent addition to her crew. And much better than a Navy-issue xenobiologist, she was a human and still knew how screwed up alien relations could be without adding in Navy politics. She excused herself, making the doctor promise he was going to rest, and made her way to the bridge. She would have to have a few things prepared and sent to Dr. Ovra's quarters. She made a note of it on her communicator as the lift silently glided to a halt and the doors opened to the bridge. She could see an abundance of shipyard engineers plugging in devices and running cables to special monitors. CMC Dillon was already there. He smiled half-heartedly and said, "Captain," and gave a rather stiff salute. Great, she thought, just what she needed. Well, she was willing to play along for a little bit. CMC Dillon, she gave him a return salute. How did the acquisition of that roll of nano-sheeting go? She asked. We got it, ma'am. God, the man looked like he was going to be physically sick over it. She'd let him stew a little more though. It's been taken care of, he said, holding out a data pad. She took it and motioned for him to follow her to her office. Good. You should be receiving a name from Bupers for a naval observer that will be joining us. And Dr. Ovra has agreed to be our resident xenobiologist, so we need to prepare her quarters. She paused. We need another weapons specialist. Master Chief Davies is an excellent start, but we need another man or woman to help shoulder some of the boarding actions if it comes to that. I agree, ma'am. I might know someone getting ready to be thinking about resigning with the Navy. If we can match her pay and maybe throw in a sweetener or two, I'm sure we could convince her civilian life ain't so bad. Besides, she'd still get to play with the Navy toys we have in the armory as well as some unregulated modifications, said Dillon. Good deal. She put a finger up as she sat down, stopping him halfway in his seat awkwardly. There will be 2 rather large shipments of corn and sugar. I suspect we're going to have another rat problem, and for me not to be informed about all the wasted produce that had to be incinerated. You know I run a tight ship and they will have to be found. She continued, gesturing for him to sit, even though he was halfway there already. His puzzled look as his mind processed what she just said told her volumes. Ma'am, we don't have to stop running this still? Dillon asked. Oh, come on, it wasn't that long ago I was a grunt myself, man. If I tell you to get rid of it, another will spring up somewhere else by tomorrow, if that long. She gave him a rueful smile. Besides, Doc said it was high enough quality he wouldn't hesitate to use it for sterilizing wounds in a pinch. She shrugged. I don't speak doctor, but I think that translates to, it's some pretty good hooch in our jargon. Why risk losing the quality moving it? She leaned over. You're going to register it as extra medical disinfectant, and that is how it best be stored from here on out. Understood. Yes, ma'am. He oddly tapped his data pad. We'll get that done. The door chimed. Enter, she said as her EXO Hadara and CME Erica walked through the doorway. All right, on time. She adjusted her seat and waited for the two newcomers to sit down before continuing. Have the shipyard's engineers informed us on the test we'll be performing today, or sent over a schedule? CME Erica replied. They said we were conducting 2 tests today, ma'am. Structural integrity test will consist of 3 trials to simulate extreme conditions such as atmospheric flight or combat. The second test is the engine tests. She looked at her data pad to double-check before continuing. Tomorrow they have us slotted for a blink drive test. And then 2 days after that is our official. Barbara immersed herself in the meeting, determined to get the tests over as soon as possible. Which brought her to now. They had actually made it through the last few days of testing and were waiting to be released from the docking slip, having passed all the stress tests, when a request came through for a Sergeant Faith to transfer over. At the same time, Dr. Overa sent a message she was at the Mars Station terminal. She signed for the transfer and ordered CMC Dillon to arrange for them a shuttle ride if needed. She was standing on the docking slip when she witnessed the Phoenix slide into the slip beside the refuge. Battered, with dents and large blast marks marring its once pristine gray hull. She could see at least one shield generator node was melted into a large mass of slag. Whatever had hit her was big, Barbara reasoned, by the size of the scorch marks. Her communicator started going crazy as she just stared at the ships now gliding in silently on tractors. She wasn't the only one. Others stared from a lot of other slips as the New York and the Neptune slid into their own repair slips. Tractors locking them in. Yes. She found herself answering without looking as to who it was. Barbara, this is Gregory, would you possibly be interested in grabbing a steak and a beer? He paused and Barbara felt her heart thump harder. You left so quick last time I didn't get a chance to ask if you wanted to do it again? Same place, same time. She tore her eyes away from the damaged ships and started for her quarters. More beers. She couldn't remember if she had ever had a man ballsy enough to call her back, and she had to admit to herself with a smile, it felt good. Besides, she was attracted to Gregory. She couldn't lie to herself about it. She tried. Thanks for listening. Please leave a like and hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed the story. If you feel generous and want to support the author's work, go visit the Patreon link in the description. Any support is welcome. Until next time.